going on? Hope you're having an amazing week so far. So previously on this channel, I've talked a lot about editing, whether it's in Lightroom or Photoshop, different techniques that you can use to enhance your photos. Today, I kind of want to go back to the drawing board and talk about composition. As far as I'm concerned, composition is the most important thing within photography that can enhance your photos and take your art to the next level. Composition refers to the elements within your image and how they are positioned in the frame. It helps guide the viewer through your photo, focusing on the elements that you want them to focus on. If you have a good composition, but you edit your photo poorly, you can always come back, re-edit the photo to your new style, your improved techniques within editing, but you can't fix bad composition. So that's why I think it's the #1 thing that you should learn when you're getting into photography. And it's something that I constantly work on myself. Whenever I'm in the field taking photos, I'm trying to improve my compositions to enhance my photos and create better images, and so that I'm evolving as a creator. So let's talk about a few compositional concepts or guidelines, and I'll show you within my photos how I created these compositions and what different techniques or concepts are used in them to enhance those photos. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the rule of thirds, and this is the easiest to use because pretty much all cameras have, whether it's in the viewfinder or in the LCD on the back of your display, depends on if you're using a mirrorless or DSLR, you can use the grid lines within your camera to divide your photo or your frame into 9 different sections. Where it intersects is where you want to focus on. So it's divided into thirds, both vertically and horizontally. And the main points that we want to look at are where in this image are these lines intersecting. So we can see the bell tower is one focal point we want to focus on. You can see it's being intersected by this grid. The front of the church is being intersected right here, and then the sunset itself. Additionally, we have this third line intersecting the church and the bell tower, and then this line here intersecting those windows. So compositionally, for a rule of thirds, this is a pretty strong image, or composition, I should say. And so when you're thinking about your composition, like I said, this is the easiest to incorporate. So when you're in the field, think about having some of your focal points actually intersecting those lines. All right, let's talk about my personal favorite compositional technique, which is incorporating leading lines into your image. And this is how you draw your viewer's eye through the image to focus on different elements within the frame that kind of tell a story, that draw your eye and focus on things and elements that you want them to focus on progressively. So in this frame, I'll actually show you all of the different leading lines that we're talking about. Some are pretty obvious, but when you're actually creating your image and in the field and you're framing, especially when you have all of these lines, think about having things coming out of the corners of the image. So we can see this line right here is coming out of the corner. This one as well, starting to draw your eye in. We have some framing here as the image kind of draws in. Here's one focal point. Here's another focal point, and once we get up here, we actually start seeing this Milky Way. And the core of the Milky Way is drawing your eye in here. So there's all these leading lines that can draw your image through the frame, like so. So not only do we have all of these leading lines that kind of draw your eye through the frame to the subjects that you want or the elements that you want, if we look at the rule of thirds again, we can see that this intersects pretty nicely. The top mound of rock and me are roughly in that intersection right there. The puddle is intersecting that third line right here. And these leading lines are all drawing it to this, and then it brings you up to this third. So compositionally, this has leading lines. This also goes back to the other point of rule of thirds. And then additionally, my second favorite, it really incorporates both the leading lines as well as foregrounds. And what I like to think about is when I am in a scene in nature, what is the overall experience? It's not just the mountain that we're taking a photo of. It's also the rocks, the flowers, the sticks and logs that are in the frame. You know, when you're there and you're in awe of this amazing landscape, it's not just where you're pointing your camera. And so incorporating foreground elements is really one of the most important things within my photography. This one is a little bit easier because of these really cool textures of rock that are out in Arizona. But let's actually look at another different frame that incorporates foregrounds. And so we can see a couple of different ones. We see rocks here and the cool textures there. In this photo, we have obviously this, the waterfalls and the lush blue and greens that are in the Pacific Northwest. And when you're in an area that's as photographed as this, what I try to do is create unique compositions. And so that's where those foreground elements come into play. So what I tried to do was focus as well on this tree that has some cool textures in the bark. So we have not only these textures that are incorporated, but textures here, some light, some ferns in this foreground. We also have some really nice framing by doing so that helps with the composition. You can see this kind of V that's almost symmetrical that overall helps to the composition here. Another one would be using water elements, creating motion. This is an interesting, so we have the waterfall, which is obviously, one of the focal points or is the focal point as well as the Milky Way. But how do we actually strengthen this? So if we, cut out that foreground, that's a nice image right there. But what is stronger is when we have an overall story to tell. Yes, this is a cool waterfall, but how about the water that's coming downstream of this? And what's the motion that we can incorporate in that? We have the motion in this waterfall, but how about some foreground elements? So that's why when in the field, I wanted to get low and close to the actual water. You have to get a little cold and a little bit wet, but that's why we're here. We're here to create cool images. So not only is this something interesting to look at, but it also creates more leading lines, overall strengthening the composition of this photo. And that's really where, when you have these foreground elements, you're able to use other techniques like those leading lines. So we can see this water is starting to bring our eye up with these leading lines. It's creating motion, it's telling a story. We also have the leading lines here and here, bringing us to this focal point, but also having something interesting to have our eye wander through the photo, but in a intentional way of doing so. And so overall, I hope this video was helpful. I think the primary takeaway that I encourage you to get from this is to incorporate as many compositional guidelines, if you will, into your photos. It's a constant learning process. I am always trying to get better at my compositions and incorporate more leading lines. When I'm in the field, looking at the subtleties in the ground or the scene that I'm working with, maybe taking a couple steps over because there's a stronger leading line or a stronger foreground there. Because at the end of the day, we need to create unique photos. There's so many photographers out there and so many talented photographers. How do you set yourself apart from them? Well, it's by improving your composition. Yes, also improving your editing, but you can always go back and edit a photo that has a strong composition with new editing techniques that you learn. You can't go back and edit a photo that has a bad composition and expect it to be better. So that's why my focus is on composition first and foremost, and then it comes into editing, then it comes into chasing really good conditions and light. But if you can have really good composition, you're telling a story, you're setting your photos apart because they draw their eye, they're more captivating than other photos. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that some of these techniques you might have known about, but actually looking at the different leading lines or different techniques helps actually put them into practice for you when you're out in the field. I hope that you're proud of the photos that you create and you continue to strive to be better, because this is a never-ending journey of improvement. At least that's the way I look at it. I know that my photos can always improve, and I hope that's how you view your work and are at the same time proud of that development. As always, please do drop a comment if you have any questions, thought this was helpful. Please do drop a like. And if you're not subscribed already, please do that as well, as we'll be going over different techniques, both in the field, editing, all of that stuff. Hopefully you can learn something from the journey that I'm going through. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.